Acts 23 for us tonight. So I'll read that for us now, and I'm reading from the ESV. I'm going to start from verse 30 of chapter 22, just for context. But on the next day, desiring to know the real reason why he was being accused by the Jews, he unbound him and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet. And he brought Paul down and set him before them. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, "Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up until this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck?" Those who stood by said, "Would you revile God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.'" Now when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, the son of Pharisees. It is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial." And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Then a great clamour arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?" And when the dissension became violent, a tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now therefore you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly. And we are ready to kill him before he comes near." Now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush. So he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, "Paul the prisoner called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you." The tribune took him by the hand and going aside asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more closely about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things." Then he called 2 of the centurions and said, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix, the governor." And he wrote a letter to this effect. "Claudius Lysias, to his excellency the governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving of death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night to Antiparis. And on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go with them. And they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor. They presented Paul also before him. On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from. And when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive." And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. All right. Acts chapter 23. Thank you, Jeremy.
Come a little bit closer. See, we can't sit in a circle tonight. Here we go. Is that a bit better? Good evening. Oh, don't adjust that. Acts chapter 23 we've got tonight, and I was hoping to have it pretty interactive, so please make sure you all answer the questions when I ask them. Got some lollies. Not sure we'll use them all, but hopefully. All right, we're going to start with just a little bit of a background, I guess. Last time we had Billy do Acts chapter 22, and it's been a few weeks since we did that, so I thought we'd run through that and we'd ask a few questions and see what we remembered from Acts chapter 22. Start of Acts chapter 22, Paul raised, we see he tells us all that he's raised as a Pharisee, and it tells us that he used to be somebody that used to persecute the ecclesia. Then we get down to about verse 5 or 6, and the question is, where was he on his way to? You've got to answer the questions or I stop talking. Damascus, Redskin? Lollipops? Or fizzes? Minty? Okay. Well done. Okay, yep, he was on his way to Damascus, and who spoke with him? Kids should know this, come on. Saul travelling to Damascus. Jesus, who was that? Mia. Oh, Redskin? Watch your teeth. And who helped him after he was blinded by the light? He was revealed to Jesus, was revealed to Saul. And then who was the guy that helped him home? Honey Loz? Ananias, excellent. What do you want? Oh no, come on. Lollipop for Luella. That's right, and he took him home and he regained his sight. And then in verse 21 we're told he had a mission. What was his mission? Sent to the Gentiles, excellent. And what happened in the verse before that? No, that's incorrect, don't worry about that. Okay, so the Jews wanted to kill him right from the start, didn't they? And so we saw at the end of the chapter 22 that the chief captain sees what's going on when the Jews are all about to attack Paul. He looks out and he looks like he's about to get flogged. So what happens? The chief captain takes Paul up to his castle, and he's about to flog him and tie him up, but what does Paul say just as they're about to flog him? He's a Garrick. Did you hear any laws? Okay, Redskin. Yes, that's correct. So he is a Roman citizen, so they cannot do that. So in verse 28 of chapter 22, it says this, "And the chief captain answered, With a great sum obtained I this freedom. And Paul said, But I was freeborn." What are the two ways you can become a Roman citizen? Anybody know? Back then? Born one and purchased. Absolutely correct. So the chief captain was obviously purchased. I think I read that they used to... How did you get lollies? I think I read that they actually served in the army for up to 25 years, something like that, or the Caesar could grant them and they could become a Roman citizen. But Paul was a Roman citizen because his mother and father were Roman citizens. And so, as Nick read at the end of that chapter, Paul is loosed the next day, and again he goes down and is before the chief priests and the council. And so we get to chapter 23. And in verse 1, Paul says, "To this day, I've done nothing wrong." He said, "All I've done is what God wanted me to do." And so Paul was before what they call the Sanhedrin. Can anybody tell me, this is the fifth person so far to appear before the Sanhedrin. Can you tell me the first four? Just take a guess. The easiest one's the first one. Okay. Hang on. I don't want you to answer yet. Oh, well done. Jesus was one? In where chapter? Do you have a chapter? Let's take Luke 22. That's the one I had written down. Okay, but you're probably right. Okay, Jesus was the first one. Who were the second one? That's a clue. Were, as in two people. Oh, why do you know so much? You can have a lollipop. Well done. And chapter and verse? 4. Acts 4. Well done. Who was the third group? Oh. The disciples were also called before the Sanhedrin. Okay, so nobody got that, but that's Acts 5. And then the fourth? Oh, really? Was he? He's not on my list. Wasn't he part of it? He was part of it, wasn't he? He was one of them? I'll give you a lolly anyway. You said it before. Stephen, exactly right. Now, Stephen in Acts chapter 6 was called before the Sanhedrin. So that is... And then we come and we have now Paul before the Sanhedrin. In verse 2, we see that Ananias, the high priest, obviously he didn't like what Paul was up to. Do you have any idea why, what he had against Paul? Sorry? Yes, exactly. Anybody got anything else?
Ananias and Paul had probably studied together under Gamaliel, so he probably was like the betrayer. Paul had sort of left the group.
Yep.
Seen better.
Yep.
Ananias probably hated his guts.
Yes, excellent, brilliant. So, well, you are both right. No one's wrong these days. Okay, so excellent. So he tells somebody, listen, you're going to have to smite him on the face. So they went to smite him. And what does Paul say in verse 3? We read, "Then Paul said unto him, God shall smite thee, thou whited wall, for sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law." So, what does anybody know what whited wall is a reference to? Not what I read. But is that what it's referring to?
Christ calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs.
Yes, that's getting close. Because they were.
Because they're all clean and wholesome on the outside and look holier than everybody, but inside they're
Hypocrites.
hypocrites.
Yeah, yeah. And I think they say that's where the saying whitewash, like you said, comes from. Just everything's white and you just wash over it, paint over it. It's not really that good. And so he was just calling him a hypocrite pretty much. And the second part of that verse goes, for sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law. Does anybody know where he's kind of quoting from and what he's talking about? Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 1. Turn there. Deuteronomy 25, verse 1. If there be a controversy between men, and they come unto judgment, that they judges may judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. And it shall be, if the wicked man be worthy to be beaten, that the judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before his face according to his fault by a certain number. And it goes on. But I think what he was pointing out that he hadn't even been trialed, he hadn't even been found guilty, and the law required them to be tried and to be found guilty before that they could deliver any punishment to them. And I think Paul was saying to the Sanhedrin, you can't smite me before you try me and find me guilty. And so it goes on to verse 4. They say to him, and they that stood by said, revilest thou God's high priests? And verse 5 said, then said Paul, I wist not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people. What do you think verse 4 and 5 are saying? James? No. You didn't know it was a high priest? Do you think that's what it's saying?
A couple of different thoughts, whether it means that he didn't know or recognise he was the high priest, or that he wished he wasn't the high priest. So, in other words, because of his behaviour, he really wished that he wasn't the high priest. So there's
Differing views.
on that.
Yeah, well, that's good to know you have differing views, because I found the same thing, but I wasn't sure if I was right. so yeah, they didn't actually. There's one thing that they think that maybe Paul didn't know that it was the high priest that said that, and the other is that he may not have felt. Paul might not have felt that he was legally the high priest. So yeah, that's what we think it's saying in verse 5 and 6, 4 and 5. Yes. Yes.
Just to put a context in where actually all this happens, what physically happens, these last couple of chapters, just so that people can sort of picture it in their mind. Where it talks back in chapter 21, for example, it says, chapter 21 verse 37, it says Paul was led into the castle. So this is all taking place in Jerusalem. And when it says that Paul was led into the castle, this is leading into what you're talking about tonight, where Paul was led into the castle, it's almost certain that castle is referring to is the Tower of Antonia, which is we've got it there. You can show it on the screen.
I'm not that developed, so. Okay.
Well, okay, we can just hold it there.
It's circled.
Right up in the top corner there is that big Roman towery thing
See it.
that was built over
You
the
boys
top
see.
of the temple, right? So that's the
Big
castle
screen.
that it's referring to. Now, if Jeremy was able to sort of zoom in a bit on that.
This is the only bit left, is that correct?
Okay, no, just and move it across a little bit so we can see the other way.
Oh, so clear.
Where it says that he was led into the castle, he's being brought up from the temple area there.
Yeah.
And he's coming up, and there are stairs that lead up onto the
Yeah.
Tower of Antonia from the actual temple area there. And today, if you can actually see the entrance in the rock of where those stairs were that Paul was led up. And then it says that there was this uproar, and he asked in verse, he asked to speak to the people. So it's almost certainly that as he's going up the stairs and there was this sort of veranda thing there, that's where he spoke to the people down in the temple from that spot that you just showed us.
Yep.
So this just helps make it real in our minds. So he's actually speaking from that circled area back to the people who are in the court, in the
Courtyard, yeah.
temple area, right? And so then it says that after he gives that speech and so on, we come to verse 24 of chapter 22. It says, then after all that happened, that they brought him into the castle. So now he's taken inside the Tower of Antonia, and the events that take place after that, they're going to flog him and that sort of thing, as you just described. And then, at the end of verse 30, it says that they brought Paul down and set him before the Sanhedrin that you're talking about. And the Sanhedrin had their own meeting place down on the Temple Mount area, just back down those stairs and along near where the edge of the temple was. So,
Probably around there,
yeah,
behind there.
sort of at the bottom corner most likely there, but it doesn't really matter. But the idea is that this is physically how Paul was moved around in that situation. And so he goes up the stairs, he addresses the people from this sort of veranda thing, which you can actually still see the remnants of that today. He's taken into the castle, or into the Tower of Antonia. Then he's brought down and he is interviewed by the Sanhedrin, who had a couple of meeting places on that Temple Mount area. But that's where it all took place.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's beautiful. I was going to tell that later in the story, but you've told it now. So I remember when we went there, no way, no, that was brilliant. And so now we all know where he was. And in verse 6, Paul creates absolute controversy between the two, because we know the Sadducees and the Pharisees didn't agree on. What didn't they agree on? Oh, that's a lolly at least. What do you want? Oh, perfect. Me too. Oh, Red Ripper. I don't follow that kind of stuff. It's Redskins. Yeah, well. Excellent. So yes, they.
Hang on, I only lost
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, yes, don't believe. Did I read that they didn't actually believe in angels too? And one more thing. What was that? Verse 8, the spirits. Yes, it is. That's why I knew it, because it's actually in the Bible. So, we've covered that. So, it's interesting, verse 9, that actually some of the Pharisees didn't actually find him guilty. They actually agreed with what Paul had to say, and they thought, what does it say? It says, we find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. So they thought maybe that God was on Paul's side and he should be let go. Now, in verse 10, all of this is happening down in the temple area, which we've just actually discussed. So we know where it is. And from that Tower of Antonio, the chief captain sees from the castle, looking down from that tower, and, yep, we just covered all where he was standing, Tower of Antonia, and he drags him back up into the safety of the castle. He sees that they were about to kill him, and that he drags him back up into the castle in verse 10. And in verse 11, we see that he stays overnight. And who is it that appears to him in verse 11 as he's there at night? An angel, yep, and he says to him, be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. So, what he's done in Jerusalem in being challenged by the Jews, he also will have to go to Rome and face the Romans and be challenged there. So, Paul at least knows he's got a little bit longer to live because he's got to get to Rome before he will be killed. And then we go on in verse 12, it goes on, and we find out that there's 40 odd Jews that put together some crazy idea that they're going to kill Paul the next day. And they say, and they make a bond with each other, a covenant, and they say, let's not eat or drink until Paul is dead. Have you ever made a plan like this? Not that until somebody's dead you're not going to eat and drink, but sometimes we do. So I'm not going to do this until this happens. You know, we have to be careful. I think this is one of the lessons out of this chapter. We have to be careful what we say we're going to do and what we're not going to do until certain things happen, because you know what? It doesn't always go to plan. So that's a little lesson for us. And we'll discover these guys later on in the chapter are probably starting to get pretty hungry and pretty thirsty. And so in verse 14, somebody comes to the chief... in verse 14, somebody comes to Paul to tell him about the plan that they've put together. And who was it? His nephew. Excellent. Is there anybody know anything about Saul's sister? Nope. Anybody know anything about his nephew, apart from this? I think that's their second good lesson for the night. It's interesting that somebody so insignificant can play such a vital role in the salvation of so many people. By him doing these actions, by going to see Paul and then by going to see the chief captain, we see Paul does not fall into the hands of these evil men overnight. And that's a lesson for all of us. Even though we might find ourselves insignificant, we do still play an important role in maybe the salvation of somebody else. And so he tells Paul the plan that they've hatched, and Paul summons the centurion. It's interesting to note that Paul had quite a bit of sway, obviously, in that castle. He was able to summons a centurion and get his nephew taken to the chief captain. So, who is this chief captain that it talks about? First of all, we're told his name later on. Does anybody know his name later?
Felix.
Close. That's his boss. Verse 26. Claudius Lysias. Am I right? I'm right. Okay, does anybody know the setup of a Roman... It says, in one of the previous chapters, it tells us that he is... it talks of him as a chief captain, but it also talks of him as a... If I can find it before you, that'll be good. Verse 21, chapter 21. Anyway, he's the head of a section. He's not a centurion, so a centurion was the head of up to 80 men. No, Romans, different. Not 100, 80, or up to 150. So it varied in numbers. It's funny, it didn't add up. Have you got a pen and paper, anybody? I've got a bit of paper here. I'll show you how they have a pen. So, they had in a legion, so this is a legion, all right? So if you ever hear of a legion, then they have, this is the little circle, if you can see that. That is the centurion. He's in charge of 80 people, right? And that's the 10th of whatever they call them, the 9th. And there is 10 of them. But the first one, this is the structure of the army, if it makes sense. There's not 80, it's double, so it's up to 150 men in that section, and it's got one centurion looking after it. And so all up, there could be up to 6,000 people in one of these little mini armies that the Romans had. And this guy that we're talking of was probably one of the leaders of these ones, the front set of 150 men. So he's a pretty senior guy, and he was pretty senior. And he had a bit of pull. I've researched that. Anyway, so he wasn't just your average centurion. He was somebody who had a fair bit of power, and obviously he had the power to send Paul all the way to the governor of the Judea, which was Felix. Okay? You should research that legion and how they're made up. It's quite interesting. I can find my notes. And so we get to verse 17. Paul gets yep, we've taken that. In verse 19, it says the chief captain, took the nephew by the hand. I think that's interesting. I wonder if he was a young boy and that's why he took him for a hand, or if he was probably an older person, but it shows the trust that he had in this man by taking him by the hand. That's my ideas. I don't know if anybody else had any ideas on it. No, Johnny? You agree with me? Yep, thought so. Okay, and so we get to verse 20. Verse 20 to 21, we're going to read it. Does anybody want to read it? Jack? Verse 20 of chapter 23. Have you got it? Yeah, you can borrow his. Verse 20.
And he said, the Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as thou they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. Now are they ready, looking for a promise from me.
Excellent. Thank you. So, as we see, the nephew is one step ahead of the evil Jews, isn't he? And he's gone to the chief captain and he's told him all that they're going to do. And in verse 22, the chief captain knew the danger this would actually put the young nephew in. The young nephew, by speaking out, was actually putting himself in a lot of danger, because next thing the Jews would be after him. So he said, don't tell anybody that you've been here to see me. Don't tell anybody that you know the things that you know. And he gets him to leave and not say a thing. And overnight, he puts together quite an army. So we drew a little picture of the army that he put together. He got 2 centurions. He got an army of 200 men on foot. He got 70 horses. So each legion had about up to 140, between 120, 140 horses. So he got half his horses in that whole legion. And he got 200 spear soldiers. It's quite a lot of people to put together. So it shows he had quite a bit of power and had quite a fair few resources under him, and a horse to carry Paul. And he put them together probably within a few hours to get Paul out of the city and get him to Felix. Does anybody know who Felix was? I've already told you, but you can answer me again. Governor? Oh, Lolly. What do you want, Fizzer? Yep. I think I'll get the yellow one. Anybody else know any other interesting stuff about Felix? It's not in the chapter, it's just general history knowledge, I guess. Felix a cat. Isn't that Garfield? Oh, okay. No, Felix had 3 wives. I would have told you their names, but they're so complicated. He was known as a very cruel person. He was known for somebody who wasn't the best judge. He was very open to bribes. And so he was pretty much like most politicians today. And so that's who Paul was being sent to. And so this Claudius Lucius, the chief captain, writes a letter, and we read it in verse 25, and I want somebody else to read. Who wants to read? Xander? Yep.
Oh,
And you're next.
what verse?
25 of chapter 23.
And he wrote a letter after this manner.
Read along the line. I've been no good as a school teacher.
Claudius Lysias, unto the most excellent governor, Felix, sendeth greeting.
This man was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army, and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman.
Stop. Has he told a lie in his little letter yet? So back in chapter 22, remember he was just about to give him a good flogging, and Paul said, hang on, I'm a Roman. Well, it's interesting that he says here, he goes, I rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. Well, he didn't really rescue him. Paul had to mention that I'm a Roman. And then, but anyway, he paints a good story for himself, and he makes himself look good. Read on.
And when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth into the council.
Christine, you can read.
I found that he was being accused at questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death imprisonment.
And may as well read the rest of the letter.
And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him.
Excellent.
Then,
Oh, that'll do. Oh, thanks, mate. You can read the next one.
then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, I took Paul and brought him by night to
Perfect. Hold it there, because that's our next point. Afterwards, interesting, the letter that is written, it just shows us that God works through people to save other people, doesn't he? It doesn't matter if you're a believer or a non-believer. It shows that God is always working with men in different areas and women in different areas to bring about his purpose. And of course, the purpose he needed to happen here was that he go to Felix and then he go on to Rome. And now, let's reread verse 31, as you just so brilliantly did. Yeah, read it again, why not?
then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to
Antipatris. Anybody know where it is? Get your phones out. This is the only time in a talk you're allowed to use your phone. And Google Maps. And Google Tel Aviv. I'm correct, aren't I, Uncle Mark? When I Googled it in the old ones, that's where it came up. So, yep, so if you zoom out a little bit, you can see Jerusalem. And then you'll see over on the coast, Tel Aviv. And so they ran from Jerusalem in the night time with all that army, little mini army, all the way over to Tel Aviv. Do you find it, boys? Excellent. It's just to give you some perspective of geography. And then they left him there, it says. They left him there with just the horsemen and the horses. And either Connor... Oh, look at that. Is that Connor?
Yeah.
Yep. You read the next verse? Gee, I'm good. Excellent. So they left the footmen to go back to Jerusalem, and the horses kept on going. And where did they go to? Verse 33, who when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. So where's Caesarea? You know what? You can Google it too. And or you can just look a bit further up the coast and you'll see Caesarea. And so that's where they took him to next. And verse 34 says,
We're finding that, Jeremy. I can give you a fun fact about Caesarea that might help people remember it.
yes,
Anyone who's got a bench top in their kitchen at home that's made of manufactured stone, called Caesar stone, it comes from Caesarea. That's where the factory is, right next to is Caesarea on the coast. So where your Caesar stone bench top at home
yeah,
comes from the very same location as where.
all the stuff, all of it.
Well, there are a couple of different manufacturing points around the world now,
Oh.
but it was invented by the Israelis, and Caesar Stone's world headquarters are right next to this, the ancient town of
Caesarea.
Caesarea. So next time you see a Caesar Stone bench top,
They're rich.
think of the
Oh.
Apostle Paul right next to it.
Okay. Apostle Paul next door, Caesar bench top. Excellent. That's good. Thank you. And so he's delivered to Felix, and we also find out that the little town that Paul was from, Cilicia, which is in Tarsus. Do you know where Tarsus? Have you ever looked up where Tarsus is on a map? Google it. It's in Turkey. It's up the top above Crete. It's quite probably quite a nice place. You just find it, boys? No, you didn't. Well, that's stupid. Anyway, so in the next chapter, whoever's doing the next talk, we find out that it took just 5 days. Felix says, I'm not going to do anything with Paul. He can just stay here. And he went into Herod's judgment hall. He says, they've got to bring the accusers. Those who accuse you have to come to me, and then we'll have the trial. And you know, it says in the next chapter that after about 5 days, the high priest descended with the elders and they came up and met with Felix. You got to start to think that those guys that made the pact that they weren't going to eat or drink until Paul was dead would have to be getting very hungry and very thirsty, and if they weren't, they were dead. They died before Paul. Okay, so there was a few lessons. Does anybody have some? I've got 3. No, we're running out of time. Going over time too. This was my lesson. Don't make promises or bets that involve your life. It's a good one. God works through the just people and the unjust people. And God will always provide a way for something to get done if it's in his plan and will. Anybody else have any? No? Good. I covered them all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jem. Next Wednesday, I've been told, is our half-yearly business meeting. Loving the excitement I'm feeling. Business meeting. I've been told also that we're going to be here to do it, physical meeting, not online. And there's quite a few sort of relatively important items on the agenda. So as many of us that can get here to talk about that as possible would be appreciated. Thank you from the ABs. So that's next Wednesday night. Sunday, as per Uncle Mark's email. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Thanks again, Jem. Thanks, Mia, for running the AV up the back tonight. And thank you all for coming in for your participation. We'll close with another song from the Rivo Songbook, Closer with Each Day, and then we'll offer a word of prayer.
highest heaven, God enthroned in praise. Pray my faith you'll strengthen, trust in all your ways. Be my every action, be the words I say. Be my true reflection, closer with each day. Life may bring me trials, weariness and pain, but my Lord's example, love that overcame, helps me walk sincerely, for I often stray. God be ever near me, closer with each day. As I walk in Jesus, wash me clean of sin. Faithful in your service, I will follow Him. Guide me in your wisdom, lead me in your way. Bring me to your kingdom, closer with each day.
Amazing and eternal God, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight, to come away from our busy lives in a world that leaves so little time to acknowledge you or ignores you completely. We are so blessed to have this chance, this opportunity, and we thank you that we've been able to do so tonight. We ask that those things that we've considered tonight might take hold in our hearts and minds, that we might trust in all of your ways, and that the example that you have set before us in the Lord Jesus Christ, in faithful men like the Apostle Paul, might be a guiding light to us as we draw closer with each day to that kingdom that we know is coming so very soon. We ask that you would take us from this place to our homes, dismiss us with your love, Father, and guide our every action. Help us to be there for each other and to be there for you and for your Son, Jesus, as you are there for us. We ask all these things, Father, in our Lord Jesus' name. Amen.
I bow my knee before your throne. I know my life is not my own. I offer up a song of praise to bring you pleasure, Lord. I seek the given me.